I'm Tony, and today we're going to talk about needles. Finding the right needle for the job sometimes is a super hard thing. I remember whenever I first started sewing, I didn't know anything about needles. I didn't know you had to change needles. I didn't know that there were different needle sizes. I thought I could just grab a universal needle and use it for everything with every thread. That is not the case. I had skipped stitches, I had problems, I had all sorts of things. So finding the right needle for your project is super important. So in this video, I'm going to break down what these numbers mean, how you can find the right needle, making sure you have the right matching thread, anything you could possibly ever want to know to get started with sewing and quilting. First, let's break down how to read the packages. No matter what brand you're using, there's two pieces of information that's on the needle. The first is what type of needle it is. These are both top stitch needles from two different companies. The second piece of information is the size of the needle. So these are both 90/14s. What do those numbers mean? So first off, 90 and 14 say the same exact thing. The 90, that larger number that's on that left, is a European way of doing the measurements. That number on the right, that 14, is the American way of doing the measurements. So that way, these needles can be sold around the world because they're saying the same exact thing. It's a 90/14. But what does that mean? Basically, the larger the number, the heavier the weight of the fabric. So in this case, let me find all of my needles. I have an 80/12, I have a 90/14, 75/11, 70/10. I've got 100 around here somewhere. Basically, this 70/10 means it is a lightweight fabric. So the smaller the needle, the lighter the weight. The bigger the needle, the heavier the weight. Think of it as small, light, heavy, thick. Great. So smaller, lighter, bigger, the heavier, thicker fabric. But how does that help me figuring out what needle I need? So right here in my hand, I've got universal, quilting, metallic, top stitch, microtex, jersey, and stretch needles. How do I know which needle goes with which fabric and which project that I'm making? Schmetz Needles. Fantastic guide on their website. I've linked it down below that actually helps you. There's also an app on your phone that you can download that actually helps you find the right needle for the right job. And it's an amazing app and page. So this is what I'm going to review right now, is this page you can find at the link down below. It is a guide that basically tells you which needle to pick for which fabric. So let's take a look at the Microtex Sharp. It says it's a slim, accurate point grate. We use it on microfibers, polyester, silk, foils, artificial leather, and coated materials. So it actually tells us the type of fabric. So let's say I am doing a cosplay and I've got a really stretchy fabric. You would think the stretch needle, right? Well, let's take a look at the stretch needle. It says elastic materials and highly elastic knitwear. So yeah, but that tells me I can use it not only on that stretchy material, but if I'm sewing elastics as well. So maybe if I'm putting an elastic in a waistband, if I'm actually sewing on that elastic, I may want to use that stretch needle. So figure out what kind of fabrics you are using, and then take a look at these guides and figure out which needle you want to do. Now, I'm a quilter. This is what I do. I do the pixelated quilts most of the time. So when I'm looking at the charts, I tend to actually use top stitch. I don't use quilting. Quilting you use whenever you're doing all of the layers. But I can use a universal needle, or I personally like using those top stitch because let's read the description they have on here. Top stitch, heavy, multiple or poor quality threads. Well, I can use with any threads, but you achieve a perfectly straight stitch lines and even stitches when using a straight stitch plate? Well, that's what I'm using whenever I'm quilting. I'm sewing straight stitch lines a lot, whether I'm actually top stitching or I'm assembling together. It helps me keep those perfectly straight lines and it doesn't waver at all whenever I'm putting my pieces together. Great, so using this, I've got my top stitch needle. I actually have a few different sizes. So let's take a look at figuring out what size we want to match with the appropriate needle. And this is what goes hand in hand with the thread that you choose. Okay, so let's take a look at my example. I'm a quilter. So I know that I want to use my top stitch needle because I want to go perfectly straight lines. Can also use the universal. What thread am I using? And there's a whole bunch of different threads that I can use for putting my quilts together for my top stitch. So I grabbed one of my Gutermann rolls. I've got a link down to the Gutermann website so you can see what I'm looking at as well. On the Gutermann website, they actually tell you which needles, sizes that you should be using with this thread. So I can use this thread for a couple of different projects. So in this case, this is the Cotton 50 fabric. So this is the 50 weight of the thread. And this says that we want to use a 70-10 or a 90-14. I actually use a 90-14 with this thread. I have an 80-12 that I like to use with my other threads that I have for my top stitch. But this right here, whenever I'm using a standard creating my quilts with this thread, I like the 90-14. And that's because, instead of the 70-10, because the fabrics that I use are the high quality, thicker fabrics from a quilting store. If I go to a discount big box store and get those thinner fabrics and they're not quite as good, they're cheaper fabrics, then I use the 70-10. So depending upon the thickness of your fabrics, depends upon the size of the needle that you use. Aurifil also has a really great chart on their site. I've got that link down below where, great, you find the threads. So Aurifil has all these different thicknesses of threads. They have, of course, a 40 weight, a 50 weight, an 80 weight, all sorts of different weights. If you click on the weight on their website, it tells you the size of the needle that you should be using to match up with that. So if you're using a good high quality thread, go to the manufacturer's website. It should tell you exactly what to use. Now, sometimes they have it right on the threads, depending upon the manufacturer. So look on here first, see if you can figure out what needle matches with the thread that you're using. If you can't see it on here, go to the manufacturer's website. Of course, like I said, I've linked the Gutermann and the Aurifil down below so you can explore and take a look at those. But what about projects where you have a mess? You may have used a temporary spray adhesive. You may be appliquing. There's stuff that could gunk up that needle. So, well, in that case, you have to use a specialty needle. I personally like using the chrome. So the chrome have a nice plating on there that make it non-stick. There's also non-stick needles. Make sure that what you're using it for is appropriate. So you can use the non-stick needle mixed with the other things if you're using applique, and it's not going to gunk that up. So finding that right needle for the right job is what you need to do. Now, let's say if you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't need to know all the things. I have to know all about needles. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many resources out there. There's the things that I've linked down below. Rhonda, who does an amazing presentation with for Schmetz needles. I've got her information linked down below. If you've never heard Rhonda speak, you're missing out. She is amazing. So she travels, she teaches all about needle care, all about the right needles. It's seriously, it will change your life when it comes to sewing and quilting. So if you ever get a chance to hear her speak someplace, you want to hear her speak. But there's so many resources. If all of this hasn't helped you, if you're like, I'm still confused, Tony, let me know in the comments down below. Shoot me a message. Say, look, I have this fabric and this thread. What needle do I use? And I can hopefully help you with that. I also have a Facebook group. Don't forget, the Quite Nerdy Quilters. We talk about this stuff in the Facebook group. It doesn't matter if you're a quilter or not. If you are a nerd and you love to craft, you're welcome to join the Quite Nerdy Quilters Facebook group. And I also live stream. I live stream here on YouTube, and I also live stream on Twitch. So feel free to pop in one of them, and we can talk about this in person as well. But hopefully this helped you. I know it's a lot of information in a short period of time, but hopefully this puts you on the right track. And yeah, it's a complicated but fun world out there for sewing and quilting. So hopefully you learned something. If not, like I said, reach out. We can figure these things out. It's a big, confusing topic. Don't forget to like this video, follow my YouTube, as well as Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, my Quite Nerdy Quilters Facebook group, and have fun. Have fun while you're sewing. That is the most important thing. So, thank you. Thank you for watching this long.